Hello, everyone. And today I want to talk about this painting technique, which I strongly believe is the most practical and easiest exercise if you're having trouble making portraits. And so that is, of course, making value studies. And if you don't know how to do value studies, here you can see an example on the screen, which I'm painting. And I'm going to explain a little bit what's going on here and how the process is and how can you do the same thing? How can you study the same way? So first off, I'm using a hard brush. I'm using a brush with no opacity. As you can see, I'm using the default Photoshop brushes. So there's no magical brush. Only using the most basic brush. You can even do this with your computer mouse. But anyways, as you can see, the reference here on the left has very strong dark values or very strong dark spots and shapes everywhere. And I'm just focusing on painting those. I'm not drawing every detail. I'm not drawing every wrinkle or anything. I'm focusing on only the big shapes, maybe like cast shadows of the nose, the eye sockets, the mouth. And this is pretty much what it's all about. You see, a portrait, of course, has a lot of value. It has a lot of intermediate values. And of course, painting all of those values is way harder than just simplifying them in just two. So this exercise is perfect if you're having trouble with value, because this helps you approach the stages of painting in an organized and easy way so you mitigate any potential mistakes. As you can see here, I'm starting to paint the rest of the portrait, like the light values, with this red color. I'm doing it by hand. I should have used the lasso tool, but whatever. As you can see, I'm just blocking everything that's not a dark value. So I'm simplifying them in just two values. Why did I use red if there's barely even red in the reference? Because I don't know, I thought it would be fun to just change things around. And didn't feel like, getting too complicated with all the different colors. I just went for this one because I thought it would be easier to demonstrate it like this. Once I have everything done, once I have my two values here, and just a side note, you can do this with even black and white. You don't have to use black and red as I did. You can use black and blue. You can use any color. So here I replaced the red with a darker color because I was using a very light red and I needed to have a lighter color for the highlights. Here I'm just blending everything. So I'm blending the edges that are not very strong in the reference. So you see there are a lot of edges that just blend away and are not very strong, like that one in the chin. It just blends away. So what I'm just doing is just blending it with this brush with opacity. I should have said that earlier. But yes, this brush I'm using here has opacity. That's why I'm allowed to blend everything. And this brush is also not like a magic brush. It's just a normal Photoshop brush that you can find in any program. And I'm saying this because I used to think you needed a super complicated brush in order to make something that looks decent. But as you can see, this is not the case. You can still blend the colors and the values, which is a simple round brush. Here, what I'm doing, again, just focusing on blending everything, focusing on shapes and value in general. So here's a little tip if you're struggling with the shapes. Don't focus on, okay, I'm going to paint the nose. I'm going to paint the eyebrows. I'm going to paint the mouth. Focusing on the shapes you see rather than the actual object. For example, the mouth is kind of like the Batman logo thing. But it doesn't really look like a mouth. It's just like a weird shape. And this is fine because if we attempt to draw a mouth the way we think a mouth looks, it's not going to look very realistic. Here I just started blending everything again. So you can see the upper lip on the mouth is also very blended in the reference. The rest of the edges are harder, so I'm not blending those. The ear was giving me some trouble, but again, I'm just focusing on what areas are lighter and what other areas are darker. And as you can see, I also left a lot of areas very unblended, like the cheekbone. It has very hard edges and it has a very strong shape. It's not blended like some of the other edges. And it is important to have a balance when you're painting. You don't want absolutely every edge to be blended or every edge to be hard. And even with that, you could still get away with it if you just used hard edges and focusing on shapes and trying to connect everything. So this portrait is very much finished. And again, I just use red for the whole thing. It doesn't matter what color you use. Here I'm adding some highlights in the nose and, it normally adds a lot of depth. And now it's time to move to the next portrait. So I'm doing three portraits here, three studies, which are fully rendered, well, as much as I found convenient at least. And something I would recommend if you're having trouble with proportions or with everything is to make a little sketch. You can make a sketch, just really try to avoid using lines, especially little lines, because this is not a normal sketch. You are focusing here on big shapes and value, and we're not going to draw every single detail. Something I really like about this technique is that even though it's very simple and it looks like an exercise for beginner artists, this is the way a lot of professional painters start their paintings with. Instead of just making a normal sketch, they start separating, organizing everything, and this makes the painting process a lot easier and a lot quicker, especially. When you try to do this type of studies, you might run into a little problem, which is finding the right reference. So this reference that I'm using here have a very strong lighting, as you can see. Half of the face is in shadow and it has a very dramatic lighting. But not every reference, not every portrait has this dramatic lighting. And you think, oh, I can't simplify this reference because it's way too hard. It barely has differentiated values. Separating the values from each other just seems way too hard. So if you want like an easier challenge, I would recommend using reference like the one I'm using here, which again, half of the face is in shadow. And even with that, it's still kind of difficult. It was kind of difficult to solve the puzzle and get the shapes right because like you saw me struggle there with the lips and the nose. But anyways, here I'm starting to add some color and right away I'm starting to define the lighter values here. Here I added a little highlight on the white of the eye, which so far seems to be holding everything together. And I'm just blending the values and trying to make everything look pretty. So again, here I'm using only one color. This is mostly because, the reference is also very much only this bluish color. But this also makes it easier so you don't have to worry too much about color and you can just focus almost entirely on value and highlights and just blending. It's also a lot more fun to deviate from normal lighting or normal skin tones and just paint, these colorful people, colorful faces. I always think it's slightly more interesting than just a normal, boring face here. So you can see I'm just blending everything. Again, from this point forward, it's just rendering. And this is obviously the most difficult stage of this process. However, if you practice rendering this way, it's going to be, again, a lot easier because you already know which edges you have to blend and you already know which edges to leave untouched. Because again, not all edges have to be disturbed. You can just leave some of the edges, like, for example, the ones on the eye and the eyebrow, the eyelashes, the edges are still kind of strong. And I think they remain like this even in the final result. I also thought here this was the face of a woman. So I naturally started to make the facial features a lot more feminine. So you can see I deviated a little bit. They're not always super perfect. But again, I think this is the face of a man, but I ended up making it look like a woman. I think especially the lips. I had some trouble with the lips, I'm gonna be honest. I think I ended up just redoing them, but whatever. This is the pretty thing about this technique, that you don't really get to attach to every line, to anything, because again, you spend a lot less time on a sketch, a lot less time painting too, because you can even finish the study with only 2 values. So it's pretty easy mentally. It's not very exhausting to do this kind of paintings, which is obviously a pretty good thing. And I really wish I had done more of these studies when I was a beginner and when I was starting out with painting, because I just wasted so much time with complicated techniques, brushes, and headaches. So as you can see, this is the final result, and this is also the little sketch that I started with. So you can see the comparison between these two, which is always interesting. Here we're moving on to the next and final study, which these references are all from movies. I really don't know what movie this is, but I really like the value, so I decided to go on and paint it. I'm gonna give you a little tip. If you're having trouble with proportions, use the canvas as a guideline. So you can use the negative space and the edge of the canvas as a guide on roughly how far away the lines are from each other, and how do the shapes connect with each other, which, as you can see here, I'm using the center of the canvas to try to hint at the position of the eyes and the eyebrows. And it makes it a lot easier, obviously. And I'm doing the same thing with the hair. And I'm going to be honest, at first, this portrait was looking a little bit rough. Especially, I knew this was going to be hard because the light is not as dramatic, it's not as strong as the other references, right? So the darkest spots you can see are just the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and they're very far away from each other. So I cannot simplify them in just one big shape, like I did with the other ones that I just simplified the eye and the eyebrow in just one shape. This one came out a little bit rough. I wasn't fully happy with it, but it is important to understand that they can't all be winners. It's okay to make stuff that doesn't look as great as you would expect them. Yeah, I'm trying to render, I'm trying to, add some shapes, delete some others, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And the face looks kind of goofy, looks kind of bad, honestly. I'm just trying to fix it here a little bit, trying to fix a little bit the shapes and everything. But I just said, fuck it, I'm just gonna go straight with it and paint it all red to make it fun and easy. So what I just did here is getting a bright red, and I just started painting, replacing all the white with red. So here I'm just painting everything, I'm filling everything with red, and for some reason I liked it a lot better instantly. It just looked a lot more fun. And we're gonna start blending the edges. Here I'm blending the eyes. It's just like a puzzle. It's just the first stage is just figuring out the puzzle and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. Didn't fully like it at first. It was looking just kind of a little bit weird. But then when I started blending the eyebrows and the nose, everything started coming together. I was still not fully satisfied with the final result, but it came out pretty all right. So this one took me, I don't know how much time. I know the first study took me 1 hour. This one took me a lot less. This might have taken me like 30 minutes, the whole thing, because using this technique is very easy, especially with just using red, painting everything with red. You just have to focus on blending. And I was a little bit afraid of deviating so much with the colors, and the values are also different. Well, you can see sometimes I use the grayscale filter to check my values. It came out okay. Again, you can see the reference here on the left. You can see the spots where I wasn't very accurate and I ended up fucking up a lot of the proportions and the shapes and some other random stuff. What I was saying with the blending just the right amount of edges, you can see here I did a lot of blending, but at the same time, our parts are very untouched. You can see the spots in the face where it's very flat, but it doesn't make the painting look flat because the rest of the edges are blended. And rendering is just spending way too much time blending the edges and making them look very smooth and soft. And so as you can see here, this is the final result, and this is the little sketch I did. So you can kind of compare them to each other and see what decisions I decided to keep and what decisions I decided to just blend away. So yeah, you can see the high resolution drawing here on the screen. I'm gonna try to upload one video a day. So if you want to learn more, please consider subscribing. And if you're very serious about painting and want me to help you improve and take you by the hand in the entire process, you can go to the first link in the description and you will find my course and my Patreon. So please check that out. This was it for today's video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.